did transition pictures for General George Patton. He died in 1945 at the age of 60 after a very, very illustrious military career in the US Army. He was a West Point guy. He fought in World War I. He led several battalions during World War II and just became famous, notorious, legendary, whichever one you want to use, for being a fabulously charismatic and brave and visionary leader who inspired tremendous confidence in people. You could be worn out and not have an ounce of fight left in you, and after 5 minutes talking to General Patton, you'd want to get up and continue fighting. He was that kind of inspirational guy. And it was kind of ironic, actually, how he died, because he'd come off the back of World War II in 1945, and he was taking some time off. I think he had problems towards the end of his military career and was a little despondent, but he took time off to go pheasant hunting with a friend. And on the way there, the car crashed. He hit his head on the glass in front of him, in the seat in front of him, and he broke his neck and back, I think, and was paralyzed from the neck down. It was a tragic and ironic end to a man who'd endured so many conflicts over so many years. And in the end, he died of pulmonary edema and some kind of congestive heart failure thing. It was very, very sad and unfortunate, and a terrible way for a man of such distinction, a military man of such distinction, to end his career. But I took a look at these pictures thinking, well, this will be quite interesting. I'd not done a soldier before. And when I went in to the cave thing I always see, this metaphorical cave, he arrived almost like a superhero, which you would expect. He landed so hard in front of me that he actually cracked, in a metaphorical way, cracked the ground he was standing on. But immediately he had a problem. When he walked, and there was no real resistance to any of this, but when he walked as if he'd been shot in the thigh, dragging his leg behind him. Now, you don't need to do that in this environment. In the transition phase, all ailments and incapacities go away. You're free. You're liberated from that. For some reason, he couldn't let go. And it was so fascinating how what shouldn't have been a struggle, what shouldn't have been any kind of fight at all, became in his hands a struggle and a fight. Because he dragged his leg halfway up the tunnel that's always there, the one that leads to the light at the top, and he became completely despondent. Sort of like, why me? As if he'd had some kind of invincibility grafted onto his identity. Why me? This is terrible. He saw himself in his own consciousness at this particular point as a loser, as a leader who'd let his side down, as if by showing fallibility, he'd betrayed his reputation as a survivor. And he couldn't accept that. He was fighting after he'd stopped fighting. He was still dying after he died. He couldn't let go of what he'd been through. He carried on walking up the tunnel to the chamber where the light is. He was not only witnessing his mortal death, he was witnessing the death of his expectations, of his illusory invincibility. He spent so many years fighting that peace, when it arrived, and this was total peace he was facing, was almost unacceptable to him. Maybe he dodged death so many times during his career that the fact that it had caught up with him finally was something he couldn't even get his head around. And he dragged his leg, which was fine and not an encumbrance at all, but he made it into an encumbrance. He dragged it over to the light and sat on the rim there, despairing, confused, unable to really rationalize what had happened. And I thought, what if I go in and have a look through his consciousness, I align with that and see what he's seeing? And sure enough, it was startling. There were bombs going off. There were people lying on the ground. There was commotion and chaos and bangs and gunfire and people running. It was just this massive tumult, like a fever dream of horror. And that's what filled his consciousness after decades of fighting. There was no peace there. There was no room for peace there. This was a guy who had come off the back of World War II and didn't know peace. And when I came out of his consciousness, he just gave a groan. He lay down on the rim of the light, still unable to process what had happened, but too weak at this point to resist anymore. It's like, just take me. Let's just go. I don't even want to think about this anymore. And General Patton rolled into the light and was gone. And you know, it reminded me of something I wrote in Why Your Life Matters about a thing called destiny points. I have this theory that each of us has a number of destiny points in our life. Maybe half a dozen for most of us, 4, 5, 6, something like that. And a destiny point is that moment where our life, our existence, becomes important to the whole. Everything else is just filler. But at certain points in our life, we become important to somebody else. For example, a child runs into traffic, and before a bus can hit it, you run, grab the child, and pull it out of harm's way. And then, years later, that child grows up to be a great physicist, which it wouldn't have done had you not been there in that precise moment. Or somebody is walking along the street thinking of ending it all, like life is too hard, and you come along and just smile at the person. You just smile and it makes their day and it restores their faith in human nature. The thing about destiny points is that they're not something that we can plan. They're not something that we understand in advance will be part of our contract while we're on the planet. We're just there, we act spontaneously, we do something that impacts somebody else. And for the briefest time, it's not about us. It's about somebody else. And this is what struck me with General Patton, because some people, Patton, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, these giants, Steve Jobs, they come along and they have maybe one destiny point. And their destiny point was simply to exist and do something great. And their entire life was dedicated to this one thing, and they changed the world because of that. We may, as individuals, change the world in little ways without ever knowing. But the greats, when they come along, their destiny point is their very life. They are here to change the world. And with General Patton, that seemed to be true. Which is why, when he got to the dome, he couldn't handle his demise. He couldn't handle the very idea of peace, because his destiny point was to wage war with enemies who would otherwise destroy his country and destroy the world. By dying so young, and in a dumb car accident as well, he felt like he had given up, that he was a loser. And when he rolled over into the arms of unconditional love, he would find that none of that is true. That's a mortal thing. There are no losers. There are no failures. everybody wins in the eyes of grace. And that's what I learnt from General George Patton. Alright, thanks very much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, share if you would, that'd be great. Follow me on Twitter @CashPeters. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.